Morning, everyone. My name is Catherine O'Grady. I work with the National Team for Mental Health Engagement and Recovery, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar series. And the first in our series is Living with Anxiety, and it's going to be presented by the Mayo Recovery Colleges. We're developing these webinars, I suppose, in the next few weeks during COVID as a means of supporting people through this very difficult time and through these restrictions. So we're delighted to be handing over now to our presenters from Mayo Recovery College, and Karen is going to be first up to tell you more about this. Thank you. Oh, just to draw your attention maybe to some of the housekeeping as well, before we get into this. Your name is not going to appear on the screen or your picture. You will be prompted when it's time to ask questions. Webinar, and the webinar is going to last approximately 60 minutes. So we will prompt you when we come up to these sections, and there will be information, and so people will tell you how to capture that as we're going along. And there may be some resources that your attention will be drawn to, and we'll tell you more about that as we're going along. So thank you, and I'm going to hand you over to Karen now.
Thank you, Catherine. We're delighted to be here this morning with myself and my colleagues, Billy and Shane, joining you this morning as the first of one of these webinars. So my name is Karen McHale, and I am the peer educator here with the Mayo Recovery College. Normally, we are based in the GMIT in Castlebar, but since March and with COVID, we transitioned to online recovery education. So what that is that it's a space for anyone that has an interest in learning more about their mental health or maybe their loved one's mental health to come along and take part in our sessions. And we do that online, just as we're doing today. But the difference with our sessions is that they're interactive. And so if you want to check out our full timetable on that, it's on recoverycollegewest.ie. And for some of you this morning, it may be the first time that maybe you've come along to a webinar. Maybe you're well used to coming to these webinars. Maybe something attracted you in the title of this, Living with Anxiety. As Catherine was saying, you will have an opportunity later on. So, sit back, relax, get a cup of tea if you want to, and just, give this hour to yourself. And as Catherine was saying, you will have an opportunity to answer some, or to send us some questions later on.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Delighted to be here. My name is Billy Clark. I'm a recovery education facilitator with the Mayo Recovery College. And I also have my own lived experience of anxiety. So I'm looking forward to discussing that.
Thanks, Billy. And I'm Shane McHale, also a recovery education facilitator, the Mayo Recovery College, and also the Recovery College, covering Roscommon and East Galway. And yes, I have my own lived experience of anxiety. Don't we all these days, but it's become to the fore with me. But we'll be talking more about that, Karen, in a few minutes. So let's make a start, and I hope everyone enjoys the webinar.
Thanks, guys. So when we talk about anxiety, what exactly are we talking about there? You might ask yourself, Billy, what is anxiety?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to say that anxiety is a common feeling that everyone experiences. I suppose to give a definition of anxiety, it's an emotional and sometimes physical response to a stressful situation. So, for example, if someone is doing an exam or if they're going on a first date, these are two kind of anxious situations that come to my mind. It's totally natural response to feel anxiety. My heart starts palpitating. I start breathing heavier. I might get a bit of a tremor or whatever. Like these are totally natural responses. But I think anxiety becomes problematic when that anxious feeling doesn't pass. When it's persistent, when it stays for a long period of time. I also think it becomes problematic then as well when when there's no obvious reason for the anxiety, when you're feeling anxious but you can't pinpoint why am I feeling like this. And I think finally, I think anxiety is also problematic when it actually stops us from doing the things that we want to do. It stops us from enjoying our life. So that's kind of my own thoughts on anxiety. What about yourself, Shane?
Yeah, I think it's important, when we talk about this, anxiety in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. It's only when it becomes too much. It's just an emotion like anything else, or it's just something we experience. It's in the toolkit, so to speak. But like fear or doubt or anything else, when it becomes too much and it's holding us back, that's when it becomes a problem. And I think when you look at the world we're living in right now, and you look at the circumstances of, going through a pandemic and all that has come with that, and we're in restrictions again here, this has really revealed and built upon the anxiety levels at the moment. Where and it's really brought to the fore. We talked so much for years about technology and 24-hour media and social media and how this all adds to anxiety, and now suddenly we're in this situation where we're relying on this technology to connect. Suddenly Wi-Fi has become the most valuable commodity in the world, and broadband width and all these things that I don't really understand but have now become important to keep us online, keep us working, keep us doing the most basic things. So anxiety levels are high. I think we can say that for most people the base level of anxiety is up, just because of the circumstances. And of course, life is still going on, Karen. I mean, this is the bit when we talk about COVID and elections and vaccines and everything else, the rest of life is still going on, Karen, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for myself, if I were to answer that question, I suppose as a woman, the statistics and the facts are there that I'm twice as likely to suffer with anxiety than a male. I know the University of Cambridge did some research on that. And the different types of anxiety disorders that there are. So you have your generalized anxiety disorder, you have your OCD, you have your panic disorder. You're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, and then social anxiety. So that can be another thing. And I know we've discussed it before ourselves in the Recovery College. So back to the point then, I suppose, about the why as a woman then do we sometimes are we more susceptible to anxiety in the statistics? And that could be from when you're talking about brain chemistry, you could be talking about hormone fluctuations at different times of people's lives. It could be around families. There's lots of different things, and I know we're going to go into that a little bit, and what that's like for us. And in relation to that, I suppose, what I'd like to explore a little bit more is around what have them symptoms been like for both yourselves, for the three of us, but what have the symptoms been like when it comes to anxiety? I might ask yourself, Shane, that.
Yeah, well, for me, in terms of symptoms, well, depending on the severity, I suppose this is where it's good to distinguish, so I might experience anxiety attacks, which are very intense moments, but anxiety can be a much more long-term thing as well. And I think that's, more common. So in terms of, the effects to the sleeping patterns, because our sleeping patterns can be all over the place, can be all over the place anyway. At the moment, it becomes a vicious cycle of The anxiety feeds the sleeping pattern, a bad sleeping pattern feeds the anxiety. But it's definitely a big part of it. In a more intense physical sense, then you can start to feel the palpitations, as Billy mentioned, the shortness of breath. Then we're into the realm then of more immediacy then. And, you know, for me, someone who does live with anxiety attacks at the moment, and this is something I'm only kind of getting to grips with at the moment, these are all new symptoms and can be quite frightening symptoms. Billy, you can relate to some of these symptoms as well when it comes to anxiety.
Absolutely, Kid. I can definitely relate to the physical symptoms and the heart palpitations. One of the ones that really used to distress me was the actual shaking. I'd be, you know, very visibly shaken, like, you know, and all this kind of thing. And it really, I suppose, and then along with that kind of came the embarrassment of, oh, look at people watching me or people seeing me like this or whatever. But, you know, that's something I've really had to work through myself when I do feel that real intense anxiety. But I think also it's just, I suppose, maybe the psychological symptoms or the mental symptoms really that, you know, the famous thing of when we're afraid, there's the fight or flight. You know, I'm a freezer. I actually just freeze, and I literally, you know, if I'm in a situation where I feel really anxious, I literally, my brain just doesn't seem to work. I can't say the right words. I don't know what to do, all of this kind of stuff. And again, I've had to, over the years, I've had to kind of develop techniques just to kind of, okay, this is happening now, just kind of accept that and get through it. And it does pass. That's the good news.
Yeah, because when you're in it, it can feel very frightening. So my lived experience is very important in what we do in the recovery colleges. But most of my lived experience will be around depression. So such is my commitment to lived experience, and I come up with new issues to deal with that I can bring into work. So anxiety attacks are something that have happened now in the last few months out of the blue. And so for me, when I talk about an anxiety attack, what happens tends to begin with just the body goes into some sort of anxiety mode. My mind isn't actually racing at the time, but the body starts to kick in. So, you know, we talk about palpitations, that feeling in the chest that it's pounding, very short of breath, you know, rapid breathing, and tingling off my face, which is one of the most disturbing things if you don't know what's happening. You know, I have to sit down immediately. I find it I can hear people around me talking or that, but I find it very hard to put an answer together, stuff like that. So, you know, to begin with, it's quite frightening. And, you know, I say this is a new thing, but it's only actually dawned on me recently, and I am exploring this at the moment, but that in my teenage years, actually, I now know I had anxiety attacks at that time. But of course, when I was a teenager, as a teenage guy in the early 2000s, I didn't have the language. I didn't understand what any of that meant. I didn't understand what was anxiety, what was an anxiety attack. I didn't know really what mental health was. And it goes to show the importance of awareness and of language, and, you know, that we're tuned into these things. And I think this is improving, Karen. I think we can say that the younger generations are finding it easier. Well, not easier, I should say, but are more informed when it comes to these areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's being talked about more, you know, just as what we're doing here today. You know, we're talking about it more, we're bringing it to the fore. The symptoms for myself, I suppose, that I would experience would be around, so dry mouth. So I'd have to have water on the go. And even this morning, you know, the feelings of anxiety before coming on here. Now, I know, as Billy said earlier, that can be, you know, normal. It can be a motivator, but it's almost like, you know, sometimes you don't know whether you're going to cross over the line to it being right. Okay, this isn't normal. So, you know, catching yourself where you're at and saying, right, okay, just sit for a moment and breathe, or, you know, and just bring yourself back into where you are. In the past, when I would have had anxiety, and maybe not to the level of what you would have experienced, but as someone told me before once, you know, my story is messy enough for me. So my experience of anxiety was messy enough for me, and it was around dwelling on things and ruminating and thinking of the worst case scenario that would happen. So either living in the future or living in the past, but not living in the present moment. So that would have been one of the symptoms. Lack of concentration, muscles, so a tightness in my back, a tightness in my body, which can then obviously lead to pain and discomfort and all of these things. And it can also bring to the fore maybe other existing, physical ailments, and like psoriasis or dermatitis or all of that. So it can be there in the background when we speak about symptoms. So what are the causes then? Or do we know enough about our own lived experience of this? Billy, I might start with yourself around the causes and I suppose the predispositions of anxiety.
Absolutely. Well, I suppose, one of the things, and I've reflected on this a lot, because I mean, I have a long relationship with anxiety. I mean, I remember feeling anxiety as a small child, and just that feeling of, being at school, being called upon to speak, that would fill me with dread, and I just freeze up and I wouldn't know what to say and all this. And then in my teenage years, I found a way of coping with anxiety. Now, it wasn't a very positive way. I used alcohol to kind of cope with anxiety. Now, as we know with alcohol, like, it's a quick fix solution to a larger problem, and that's the larger problem that you were kind of talking about there, the underlying problems.
Yeah.
And eventually, with my alcohol use, it got to the stage where I was so dependent on alcohol, it was causing me more anxiety and more hardship or whatever. So when I finished drinking, I was lucky enough to be able to stop drinking 15 years ago, and through help and support. But I really had to start from scratch about learning how to deal with anxiety. So I suppose when we talk about underlying causes, I mean, there's kind of ones that would be very they'd be very obvious to for some people. There could be issues in childhood that may have happened. There could be one's social environment. If someone grows up in an environment where there's a lot of poverty or crime or and all this, that's obviously going to have an effect on our mental well-being. And also the opposite, if someone maybe grows up in an area which is quite isolated, or there's social deprivation and there's no supports for people, that could also be a cause of anxiety. But I think for me personally, and as I said, I've really reflected on this and I've thought about this a lot. The biggest, I suppose, underlying cause for me in relation to anxiety has always been change, fear of change. And, whether that's change in relationships, change in jobs, change in anything at all. Even when COVID came, the whole thing of putting on a mask and all this, it took me about 2 weeks just to kind of navigate through that change. That fear of change has always been at the root of my anxiety, and it's something that I've really had to work on. But I think it's one of those things, Karen, that's so subjective. For everyone has probably has their own experience of it, their own personal experience. How about yourself, Shane?
Yeah, it's so situational, isn't it? Actually, before I go into that, just a reminder, the Q&A function there on your screen. If you have any questions you'd like to ask us, we'll be answering them in a few moments, and then we'll have a full Q&A session at the end. But yes, anxiety is so situational. I'm just reflecting on it this morning. During the first lockdown, in some ways I got off a bit lightly because I live out here in the countryside. I live in the middle of nowhere. And I used to think, God, people who are in urban places, and living in apartments and so on, how confined they were. In reality, my routine here on the farm and so on wasn't really that affected, because you don't see that many people. You had space, you had air. There is isolation problems, but at least you can move around. But I look at it now as we come into winter with restrictions, and I'm looking out the window at the moment and I'm seeing fields flooded after all the bad weather. There's not many animals outside because farmers have already had to bring them in and are feeding already. And if we have a long winter, and that can happen in this country, as you know, it could be March before winter ends here, this could be, the anxiety and pressure of that would be huge for people in agricultural backgrounds, because where do you get the feed and so on. So it can be so situational, even for professionals, for services. Karen said we went online back in March. Literally within a week, we went from having no online sessions to suddenly being exclusively online. And it was Billy who did a lot of the work on that to get it going, in fairness. That was a huge transition. I think you can see in services and in the professionals that there's a certain element of like, oh, what do we do, what do we do, what do we do, what do we do? Because there's this anxiety, we should be there. And I think a lot of it is just to stay calm and be the calming presence when people need it as well. But, you know, this is a massive time of change. And change, as you said, Billy, it can be such a difficult thing. And Karen, I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You know, and as an experience that, you know, the experience of being in this, you know, where we're learning to live alongside COVID. So our experiences with that and that them experiences can cause the anxiety. Other experiences, you know, in the past, maybe childhood experience, life experience that we've been through can be a trigger or a stressor for things to you know, for anxiety to really kick in. Social occasions is another one, you know. Loud noises can be other causes, you know, too much going on, maybe lots of conversations on around the same time. Maybe worry also about our own mental health, and sometimes our worry is, you know, am I going to have a relapse? You know, what's going to happen around that? So lots of different causes, and it could be, you know, there's a certain thing that it may be genetic also, or it could be a nature or a nurture piece. So the nurture piece, you know, if we have a parent possibly who may have been anxious or had high anxiety, you know, as a child, you can be looking at that, and it can cause maybe anxiety to appear, you know, that whole monkey see, monkey do thing. Our work environment, our living environment, lots of money, debt, especially now coming up to Christmas, people, you know, so there's lots of causes there. Yeah. So we're going to have a look at the questions and answers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we have a few questions in already, so please continue to keep them coming in. We mightn't get to every question. Just looking at it, the way it's moving, we probably won't get to every question, but that's okay. We will answer afterwards in these. We'll take every question away, and we'll tell you where you can find the answers to that afterwards on our website and so on. So I'll just make a start. So a couple of questions here in terms of, so from Martha, hello from the Southeast. What would be your one top tip for dealing with feelings of anxiety? And there's also further questions then from Anonymous asking, you know, of tips as well in dealing with it. So we will get into solutions and tools in a moment in the conversation. So I'll come back to those if that's okay with you. Derek, good afternoon to you. So anxiety and sleep, we did mention about sleep. So Derek was asking, when it comes to sleep, what are the things that can trigger anxiety? He cites some examples here of, you know, the temperature not being right, or a lot of noise, other people snoring, late night screen time. Snoring one I can relate to, the late night screen time. How do we keep ourselves, you know, well when it comes to sleep and not triggering anxiety? Is there anything we can recommend there, or any thoughts there when it comes to sleep and anxiety?
That one, just because I can really relate to that actually with the trouble sleeping. I suppose a couple of things that I've done myself in relation to helping myself just to ease into that sleep better would be, first of all, is not to drink caffeine after 6 o'clock. That was just one of the things that was suggested to me that I think really works, like, you know, and that includes tea or Coca-Cola or anything like that, or even sugary stuff, because For me personally, just sugar, caffeine just sends me right off the edge, like, and I'm really kind of hyper or whatever. Caffeine for me is great in the morning and I have my cup right here in front of me, but at nighttime, it's just not a friend. And also, I think something that's become really apparent for me over the COVID period is this thing, the phone, and not being on the phone late at night, because there's something about the light of the phone that just really kind of activates my brain and really overstimulates it. So that would be one of the ways that there are two things definitely that would have I think things maybe to stay away from before going to sleep. It's just a suggestion, that kind of way.
Absolutely. And quality of sleep is so important, and it's only something that I've realized recently. So I've recently been diagnosed with sleep apnea, and it's a condition that affects quality of sleep and so on, which was adding to levels of exhaustion and anxiety and everything else, and I never knew. So it's important that physical health is also contributing to issues of anxiety and mental health as well. But thank you for the question, Derek. We've loads of questions rolling in. I just wanted to jump a quick compliment to you, Billy. With the setting up the technology for the Recovery College courses, etc., this must have been a huge anxiety-provoking situation for you, as it involved a big change in practice. It's not a question, more an observation. Well done to you. So there you go.
Thank you very much. And it definitely was. I used to have a big head of hair and everything, and now I'm half the man I used to be. Thank you very much.
So please keep your questions coming in. I know we just took a quick stop there. I just picked out a few, but we're going to take 10 minutes for questions at the end. So we will get through them all, like I said. So thank you very much for that. So Karen, I'll pass back to you. There was questions there about, solutions and tools and so on. What can we do when it comes to anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a big one. And I think everyone, can find their way, I suppose, that works for them and find tools that work for them. I know one of the ones that for me personally is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And I discovered it maybe in the last 2 years. So it's being aware of, when you're in panic mode, or when you're trying to maybe ground yourself, or trying to get yourself back to where, a place that you can function from. It's to become aware of the 5 things that you can see. So you're naming 5 things around you. 4 things that you can feel. So touching 4 things, be it the cup, be it the pen, whatever it is. 3 things that you can hear. So be that whatever it is, the sounds in the house, the sounds of maybe birds outside. 2 things that you can smell. And then the last one can go both ways. So the last one, it's 1 thing you can taste, or rather one emotion that you can feel. Now, me and my love affair with food always goes to the taste one. So I bring it back to the one thing you can taste. So you're really bringing in all the senses to kind of ground yourself. So that would be, I suppose, one of my top tips. Around the sleep bit, it would be, having a bath and a couple of drops of lavender, putting on a little bit of music, just to ground yourself. So they're very practical tips. The bigger solutions, then you're talking around the likes of cognitive behavioral therapy. You're talking around the likes of medication. And with any medication, it's always wise to have discussions with your doctor around medication as to whether, increasing it or decreasing it, or whether you need to take some or not. So they would be things that come to mind. What about you, Billy?
I think, and I just seen the first question there, one of the tips are asking for a tip was Martha Clark down in Recovery Southeast. How is it going, Martha? It's lovely to have you on board here this morning. Definitely, I think one of the main things for me, a recovery tip for me, and it was the first thing that I actually learned in my dealing with anxiety, when I stopped using the negative ways of dealing with anxiety, like alcohol and other substances, when I started putting positive ways of dealing with anxiety into action, the first thing was the pen and paper, taking out a pen and paper and drawing a line right down the middle of the page. And on one side of the line, really just identifying what is the root cause of my anxiety today, just for today, like, and it could be anything. For me, it could be fear of failure. It could be maybe that I'm afraid to say no to someone or a situation, or maybe it's just that I don't know how to deal with the situation, or I don't know the answer to something or whatever. And then on the second side of the column, I just make a list of possible solutions that I could actually go. Could I ask someone for help? Could I maybe change? Could I say no to the person or a situation? Could I change a behavior in some way or whatever? And one of the things that I found in doing that is that even knowing, I think maybe a psychological thing, even knowing that there was a couple of solutions there actually started to relieve my anxiety, like, and it's amazing. Like, whether I put them into action was another thing. And usually I learned that was the next step, to actually start putting these things into action. But even knowing that there was a solution was so important, because the feelings of anxiety that I used to get, and the overwhelming feeling, was that feeling of being trapped. I have nowhere to go. I have no solutions or whatever. But here in front of me, I had a couple of solutions written out that I could actually do. And that actually really helped to relieve my anxiety. Shane, how about yourself? Would there be a specific tip that you would have for people?
Yeah, I would find, I know for me, one of my causes that exaggerated my anxiety, shall we say, was not getting into action soon enough, putting things off, letting things build up. The to-do pile would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And, that for me would then add to the anxiety, because then I start beating myself up about it. So for me, a big part of starting to come to terms with anxiety was taking action. So whether that's a little thing, such as this morning, my coffee is decaf, just to make sure there was no issues, because I was a little anxious about this morning. Even though we're on Zoom every day, this is a slightly different format. Or it could be on bigger things. Christmas is on the horizon. We're coming to that time of year. It can be quite an anxiety-provoking time of year. There's an entire webinar on that alone. But for me, it was getting into action in terms of presents, making preparations now. The online shopping stuff I never would have really done before. But all the delivery men of the different companies are getting a tour of the wilderness of Mayo. They won't thank me for it, but it was important to get into action, because we can sit and we can think and think and think, but until we actually get into action and get that movement going, and actually getting things moving, once we're moving, once we're going, and I suppose we feel it ourselves this morning, once we started this conversation, the anxiety that we might have had about it just lifts. So I think getting into action is so important when it comes to as a tool to use. And I remember many years ago, I was a student in GMIT, the social studies program, and the time management came up. And there was this time management tool that's used in business. And it's, if you get a task that takes less than 3 minutes to do it immediately. And I kind of thought, well, that's, interesting, because, I would be a devil for, like, the tax for the car renewal would come in, and I'd look at it, I'll sort that sometime. And next thing you know, it's a month and I'm out of tax for 2 weeks and haven't touched it, or haven't gone near it. And suddenly it becomes a problem. Suddenly you're thinking about it when you get in the car. And so, a lot of anxiety is about taking action to try and reduce it. I don't know, Karen, does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose, speaking of getting into action, you're talking about physical activity then as well. So getting out even for a couple of minutes walk, or I know it's difficult for us to meet up with people at the moment, in relation to meeting up with a walking buddy or something. But even just getting outside, getting out into nature, all of these things Positive self-talk would be another one that I would use, and I'd use that in conjunction with a mirror. So you're standing in front of the mirror and you're saying, you know, you're naming it to tame it. You're catching yourself where you're at. Yes, I'm feeling anxious today. Yes, this is a big event for me and there's a lot of anxiety around it, but you'll be okay. You've got through this before. Lots of stuff like that. Some people feel, you know, using music. And we're going to show something in a few minutes around a creative piece that our students put together in their ways of dealing with challenges that might be going on for them. So, you know, there's lots of different avenues, meditation, qigong, you know, Reiki, bioenergy, lots of things that we can be using to as solutions, something to try around our anxiety. Staying connected, the biggest one of all, staying connected, and how we use, as we said, tools like this today, and our phones and our computers, and minding ourselves on that. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot there when it comes to solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what you're talking about there about movement is so important. My phone does this dreadful thing of counting my steps. And if I look, I'm looking at it here, and I've done 504 steps today, and it's nearly lunchtime. My previous job as a tour guide, I'd be doing 10 to 14,000 steps in a day. And you know, that lack of activity that we can kind of fall into because we're here sitting in front of the laptop, in the chair, camera on for so much of the day. And so many people are doing that in all types of work. You know, the actual movement, just physical movement and the activity is so important. So a walk is due later, I think, at some stage.
Absolutely. And also, you know, one of the things that COVID has really brought up for me, and I've definitely been no angel, like, you know, I still have a habit of using kind of, you know, maybe negative ways of dealing with anxiety. I've been, you know, binging on chocolate, binging on pizzas, binging on Netflix, binging on anything except for fruit, you know, that kind of way, like, you know. But I do find, and you know, this is, you know, one of the things you say, Shane, and I nearly think of it every day, like, you know, the situation we're in is so unprecedented, like, you know, so it's, you know, no one could have foreseen this happening or whatever. So we have to give ourselves a bit of a break as well and let ourselves off the hook. But definitely, like, you know, as you've said, you know, eating healthy, exercise. You know, my dog Gracie has been my COVID hero. You know, she's just really, because, you know, she doesn't know what's going on in the world and she doesn't care. All she cares about is she needs to get out for a walk, and I go with her, and just getting out, connecting with nature, out walking in the rain. It's just, it can be so refreshing, and just, you know, and no matter how I'm feeling, I always come back from a walk with, you know, feeling better, like, you know. And then for myself personally, because of my other struggles with, you know, dependency and addiction and all that, you know, keeping in touch with support groups, keeping in touch with, you know, whatever supports are out there available, like, you know. And one of the great things about the online presence, that where it's made the world so much smaller, so we can connect in with groups in London or New York or whatever that support group is, like, you know, aware groups or groups for depression or groups for whatever. There's groups for everything. You'll find it online, like, you know. So just keeping in touch, and as you said, Karen, connection really is the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. We might have a look at some of them questions there, Shane.
Absolutely, because they're flying in. So thank you, everyone who has been sending in questions. We very much appreciate it, and we hope you're enjoying the Marinara here. So yeah, like I said, we won't get to everyone, but there's an interesting one here that has jumped in. I'm trying to find it. Yes, from Zoe. I have found the lockdown and pandemic strangely beneficial to my anxiety. I was discharged from hospital just after the first lockdown, and I found the pandemic has given me a chance to take my recovery slowly. I think if life was normal in quotes, I would feel a lot of pressure to get back to work and productivity sooner. Does anyone else find this? To me, there's an awful lot in that, actually. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, Absolutely. And thanks, Zoe, for that observation and slash question, you know. And I know, so when we were in the physical sense of the Recovery College room, there may have been people that would have liked to come along to the sessions, but maybe their anxiety was quite high. And maybe at that time, they didn't have the confidence maybe to take that first step into the Recovery College room. However, online, our attendeeship has increased by 130%. So that's a lot of people coming on board, discussing online what's going on for them. And I imagine and envisage it's because we don't have the other extra added life pieces there. And to go back to your point, so you know, you're able to concentrate on your recovery, and I wish you well on that journey. Billy, do you want to come in there?
I just want to say well done, Zoe, and really and truly it's so important, just what you said there about using this time as an opportunity to heal, you know, and that's what you're right. We're blessed in so many ways. So some people are, you know, who are in that situation. I know in the early parts of my own kind of recovery, I came out of hospital and life just hit me in the face straight away. It was back to work and back to dealing with relationships and back to everything, like, you know. But the COVID experience now, where we're kind of, you know, we're in lockdown, and you know, it just, I can well imagine how that has been of such benefit to you. And you know, and if there's anyone else who's in that experience, who's in that same experience as Zoe, you know, maybe to take that opportunity and really take that opportunity to heal. Well done, Zoe. That's great news.
I think so. You've touched upon something I think we maybe need to look at in terms of the way life had gone, and you know, the values and the way we live our, just go about our lives. To have time and space is so important, and I think well done to make the most of this when the opportunity presented. You know, maybe we need to look at, you know, in terms of this obsession with productivity was the word you used, and you know, the pressure to get back to work, that time and space to just work on your recovery is so important. So yeah, thank you so much for that question. Another question here for you, Billy, I might throw it to you. Do any of you use mindfulness meditation, and can it be used as a tool? So Billy Clark, over to you.
Yeah. Well, the reason they're throwing this over to me now as well is that I'd be a real advocate for mindfulness meditation. I started that really in the first year of my recovery, I suppose. Someone introduced me to mindfulness, and I've been practicing it ever since. And really and truly, it's just been a game changer for my anxiety. And there's a lot of questions there. I see, I'm just kind of flicking through about persistent anxiety, and I would have that, like, you know, mindfulness isn't a cure all. It won't cure everything, but what mindfulness has shown me is just to first of all become aware of the situation of where I'm in, and become aware of the root causes of my anxiety. And it's also given me the tools just to keep coming back to the present moment, keep coming back to the breath. And I'll just give a quick example, because I used to have anxiety. I used to get panic attacks. And in the supermarket, for some strange reason, always in the supermarket, I'd be in a queue. There'd be 3 people ahead of me, 4 people behind me, and I'd be stuck there with my basket shaking. And I wouldn't know what to do, like, you know. So I started using mindfulness techniques, going to my breath, and just kind of, you know, that would relieve my anxious feelings, and it would relieve my panic attack, and I'd start to just settle down or whatever. So mindfulness, it's not, for me, it's not just about sitting in a chair meditating for 20 minutes or whatever, or 5 minutes or whatever. You can transfer these techniques to anywhere you are, like, you know, go to the breath, go to, you know, present moments, you know, sensations in the body, focus on something. And I've just found it so helpful to me. So yeah, I'd really recommend. And there's loads, you can find loads of mindfulness sessions online. I know the Sanctuary in Dublin, they do online sessions all the time. So maybe that might be a nice website to check out as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Billy. Yeah, and I think, you know, we all, use mindfulness in to a greater or lesser extent. Lesser on my side because I'm just not very good at practicing it, to be honest. But I'm trying, I'm learning, and definitely the power of it. It's a very powerful tool. Practical question actually here from Bill, if I can find it. Yes, will you be making a copy of this webinar available online? So we are, I believe, this will be going up on the website afterwards, and so it can be shared and rewatched there again, which would be a great resource, hopefully, if you're not sick of listening to us already. The 54321 has been mentioned a couple of times here in questions. C. Nolan, it's definitely a great tip, Karen. I know. So we were saying there's a few different versions of the one. So the version that this contributor knows, I know it as the one is to stop and take one deep breath in and slowly let it out. Which is interesting because I use the 54321 technique, with the one being the taste. I find it very helpful actually when I'm in those moments where I feel anxiety really ramping up. I've been amazed actually at how effective it has been for me.
Yeah.
But I do find with the taste one, you can find yourself thinking, well, what? Unless you happen to have a cup of tea handy or something. But yeah, so it's you take one deep breath and slowly let it out. So it's just a different take on it. So I'm jumping through more of our questions here. There's a comment here that we should all stand up and stretch. Now, we probably don't have the time to go into it now, but it's one thing that we do use in the Mayo Recovery College because our online sessions tend to be for 2 hours. And it's very important when you take a break is to get up and stretch. Isn't that right, Karen?
Absolutely. We do it quite regularly, and go through different stretches online and stuff. So that would be absolutely, but we welcome anyone who wants to get up and have a stretch at the moment. Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Thanks for that observation.
Derek, comes back to the question of money and anxiety. You know, a huge issue when it comes to anxiety, and that it causes. You know, the attitude. So Derek highlights that maybe if you come from a successful family, there's pressure to perform and be a high earner. And if you aren't a high earner, what do you do? You know, money and, you know, even the idea, so a successful family, I suppose it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. What do we see as success? What do we see as, you know, where do we get our values? And when it comes to money, how much money do we need? Are we struggling with money, or are we, you know, a slave to money as it can be? You know, but definitely, and particularly this time of year, we're what now, the 19th of November, Christmas isn't far away, and the pressure for money kicks in. I wonder, will it be slightly different this year? But I know when it comes to money, we talk about the social welfare trap and so on. It was something that I struggled with for a long time. When I was diagnosed with depression, was coming out of it, and kind of would get to a phase of like, okay, time to move out into the world and start earning money again and so on. But it will get knocked back, and we found it very difficult living that, you know, low income life. It was something very tough. I don't, Karen, Billy, do you have any thoughts there?
I can relate to it, and I think in the support slide that we're going to put up in a moment, I think there's the thing that helped me most, and one of the things on our support slide is the citizens' advice information, our citizens' information. They were such a help to me in relation to financial problems, because like that, you know, I was back to education, I was on social welfare, there was all these things, you know, questions that I just didn't have the answer to. And instead of sitting at home kind of ruminating about them, you know, someone suggested to me, you know, why don't you just pick up the phone and ring someone who knows, who will be able to give you an answer and all this. And that's where I found the citizens' advice information so helpful, like, you know, but it's definitely a problem as well. I just want to address another question as well that I seen in the thing. I just thought it just really struck me because I really could relate to it. Someone saying about when they were 16, they've been having anxiety since they were 16, and their anxiety, they're 38 now, and their anxiety is a bit more pronounced. is it normal or is it common? And you know, it kind of is. I know with a lot of my own group of friends and all this, it's something we talk about, that at this age, you know, life is, you know, and especially the challenges of life, maybe we have more responsibilities, maybe we have families, you know, all of our lives are changing all the time, like, you know. But again, that would be something now that I would look to for the supports here on the chart, like, you know. So if it's a case that the anxiety is very pronounced, maybe to kind of, you know, what I have done is, you know, sought some kind of professional help for that. Maybe just go to counseling or use some of the advice here, like the HSC crisis text line. The Samaritans are absolutely invaluable resource. They're so good at just picking up and just having that initial conversation with someone and just saying, look, I feel stressed, I feel a bit over the edge, like, you know, and just to have someone at the other end of the line just to hear you, it's so important. There's also the yourmentalhealth.ie, which is a really important website as well. And the family resource centres. I know during COVID, a lot of the family resource centres, they aren't open, but they are open, but you can only kind of meet them through appointment. But I think it's definitely an appointment worth making, because they can signpost you to all the help that's available within the community. Because really and truly, I think at the end of the day, that no matter what the root cause of our anxiety is, I think, and Karen mentioned it earlier on, the real kind of, the most important kind of resource that we can have is to connect with someone and talk about it. Whatever it is, connect, find someone that we can trust, find someone that we think will understand, connect with them and talk to them about it, you know. So that's just some of the supports for anxiety here. If you want to take, anyone who's watching, if you want to just take a little photo of that on your phone, or maybe take a screenshot of this, it's just some handy numbers to have, and we'll be putting it up at the end of the seminar again.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Billy, and thank you, Shane. And thanks, you know, to you for joining us today. And we'd like to thank Mental Health Engagement and Recovery for inviting us on to be part of this webinar here this morning. And just, I suppose, a synopsis, and while some anxiety can be healthy and it can be a normal response, it can motivate people, it can help them sense danger in your environment. And for people with generalized anxiety disorder, their anxiety can be overwhelming and debilitating, but please know that with the right help, you know, by contacting some of the resources there that Billy has said, and everything that we spoke about today, just to know as well that you can live a healthy and fulfilling life, because we do. And before I hand you back to Catherine, I'd just like to show you a 2-minute video. And in this video, it was put together by the students in the Mayo Recovery College in Castlebar, showing different creative ways of how they deal with challenges that may have been going on for them in the very recent past. So I'll play that video now.
Thank you, Billy and Karen and Shane. That was really informative and inspirational. And I suppose in a way I could relate to that anxiety level, because I was asked to do and introduce at last minute, which I hadn't expected. So I just jumped in. So it's great to even have that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In future, I'll use it, because I just speed bombed in and didn't think of half of the things I was to say. Um, yeah, a big thank you to you, and I hope you'll be joining us again at some stage in this webinar series. I just want to bring your attention to, at the beginning I did say this is something that Mental Health Engagement and Recovery are presenting as a weekly webinar series. And next week we have joining us Michael Norton and Pat Smith, and they're going to talk about wellness and maintaining wellness during COVID. And I would hope we'll be sending out the links and that to you, and I hope you'll join us again for that interesting piece as well. Also, I suppose when you're going out of our piece today and leaving the meeting, you'll be brought directly into a link that will lead you to a survey or an evaluation of this piece. And it's important for us to hear what your thoughts are on what you might like in subsequent webinars, the contents or topics that would be useful to you, and we'll try and accommodate as much as we can. I know Karen and Billy and Shane, they'll be looking at putting that up. I think, Karen, you were saying about the questions and answers pieces. You'll be looking at that at some stage?
Yes, and they'll be available on www.recoverycollegewest.ie. So they'll be available in the next couple of days.
Great. And I think also we will be recording these sessions for people who want to review them or maybe join or look at it at a later stage. And that will be available on our website on www.mentalhealthengagement. So we'll be sending you out this information anyway to keep you informed, because there's lots coming in there today. So yeah, I think just maybe to show that resources piece again, because there's a lot of resources available, and as Bailey and Shane and Karen have pointed out, the most important thing is in making that step to connect and seek support and sharing with others and joining in that conversation. And that's really what these webinars are about during these restrictions and during COVID. It's connecting conversations to promote that, and people, talk about these things and know that there is help and there are resources there for people. So once again, thank you to Recovery Mayo College, and I think people should look that up if they're not familiar with their work, because they've lots of really interesting and very good pieces there online. And I suppose, just to thank you all again, the participants. Without you, there is no webinar, and for putting in those questions. And we'll keep following up on things, and your feedback and evaluation piece will be warmly received. Thank you very much. Until next week, when you'll be joining us again, hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye now.
Bye now. Take care.